right. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome one and all to Impolite Company on the GCPR.live network. Um, sorry for all the bouncing. This is the show where we do what they say not to do. We talk about religion and politics. I'm your host, Matthew Vest. Together, we talk in and through honest dialogue, explore messy truths, try to see the humanity in perspectives different from our own. You got a thought, question, something to challenge, you can email me at contactimpolitecompany@gmail.com. And don't forget, you can subscribe to past and future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Impolite Company, look for the logo, you'll see us there. And if you want to dig deeper into the themes we explore, you can visit my blog at pastormatthewvest.com. And and if appropriate, if you feel like you want to support what we're doing here, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/impolite company. So let's get into today's conversation. I do not have a guest for today. Instead, I want to talk about two recent orders pertaining to religion and politics that really need to be talked about. These are very recent orders. And so this is what we're going to spend our time on today. And I'm going to take it line by line. I've got all sorts of good stuff to go with this. I'm just going to take a deep dive into some of these things. And the two things are, one is the executive order that was signed on July 24th of this year. It's called Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets. And the other was a memorandum from the Office of Personnel Management that came out on July 28th. And that is regarding protecting religious expression in the federal workplace. Oh boy, lots of good, lots of stuff going on here. Um, so this is what we're going to talk about. And what I want to do, especially with the executive order, we'll possibly do this with both of them. It kind of depends on how long this is going to take to kind of go through. But I really want to go through and I want to read paragraph by paragraph what these are, what they say, and there's a lot of holes to be poked in these. These are not, my estimation is these are not helpful, and they're not, but also that should not be surprising. Nothing that happens in this administration is surprising to me. It's pretty consistent with where the values are for this administration, and so it shouldn't be a surprise when we're going through any of this. So let's dive in. Here we go. So it starts off, of course, with a mandatory thing so we're dealing with the executive order, ending crime and disorder on American streets. Just the name itself. It's all about fear, folks. It's all about fear because fear sells, and it gives into stereotypes and all sorts of wonderful stuff. So this is an executive order that was signed July 24th, not that long ago, just a couple weeks ago. Starts off by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America. I guess we're following laws. It's hereby ordered. Section 1, purpose and policy. You ready for this? Here we go. Endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior, sudden confrontations, and violent attacks have made our cities unsafe. I'm going to stop right there in the first sentence. Correct. I did not make it past the first sentence. When I read through this, I didn't make it past the first sentence. Endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior, sudden confrontations, and violent attacks have made our cities unsafe. Oh, there's so many things to just say right there. One, uh, as if homelessness is specifically an urban problem. This is the assumption that homelessness is only an urban problem. That's a problem in and of itself because that's not the case. Homelessness looks different across, whether you're talking about urban or suburban or rural. It depends on how it's being defined. The Department of what is it? Housing Housing and Urban Development have a definition of homelessness, and the Department of Education has a definition of homelessness, and those two do not match up. The Department of Education definition is broader and probably encompasses more folks who are experiencing homelessness. So that would encompass people who are couch surfing, whereas the Housing and Urban Development definition does not encompass that. So you got some issues with that. Homelessness does take place in rural populations. It does take place in suburban populations. This is not just an urban problem. So that's an issue. Endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior, sudden confrontations, and violent attacks. This document does not cite any evidence for anything that it's going through. This is the biggest problem with this executive order. It doesn't cite anything. It's just making statements. We're pulling them out of thin air and we're saying this is absolutely true without providing any evidence, without showing any type of reliable data. It's just because I say so, so therefore it is. Okay. Based on what? Based on because they want it to be true, apparently. I don't know. I have nothing else to go with. So the question is, where else does this happen? Endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior. What? How are we defining this term? Sudden confrontations. A lot of this are like dog whistles for things. Sudden confrontations. Oh, I don't know. Are we talking about protests? What are we talking about? Violent attacks that only happen in cities? Do violent attacks only happen in cities? I mean, if we're concerned with violent attacks, then why aren't we doing something about gun violence? Why aren't we doing something about mass shootings? If we're worried about violent attacks, and by the way, those don't happen from immigrants. Those are primarily the mass shootings. The vast majority, and you can look this up, you can Google it, you can find sources on this. The vast majority of mass shootings happen from young white men who are citizens of this country. There's a variety of reasons why this is happening. It's not that young white men are evil in and of themselves or anything of that nature. There's stuff that's happened that leads people to do these type of things. Did a whole book on this called American Roulette. You can pick it up. One of the authors, and I don't make any money off of it. That's not why I wanted to write it. But it deals with the humanity in the situation. You get to see why somebody would be so triggered in order to go and do something like that. That's the situation, right? We're not addressing this, right? If we cared about these things, we wouldn't use them to scapegoat, which is a big problem with this entire document. Is it scapegoats as opposed to actually dealing with the problem? This very first sentence, endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior, sudden confrontations, and violent attacks have made our cities unsafe, is an old urban versus rural trope. I just looked this up really quick here. You can do this. Google history of the trope that cities are unsafe. There's a whole lot of stuff that it lists, right? Here, this is a little bit about what, when I Googled that, when it came up, it said the notion of cities are unsafe spaces is a deeply ingrained and persistent trope with a long and complex history. It's rooted in various historical periods and societal changes, often fueled by anxieties surrounding urbanization, social change, and media portrayals of crime. It goes through, it talks about ancient and medieval anxieties, industrial revolution and industrialization, 20th century anxieties like social disorganization theory, media portrayals, moral panics, broken windows theory, gentrification, perceptions of safety, all that stuff that goes into this trope, right? In and of itself, it's not based, what you can't, oh gosh, it's so frustrating. So there was the first sentence. All right, we're off to a great start, right? So let me go on. The number of individuals living on the streets in the United States on a single night during the last year of the previous administration, because of course we got to have that dig in there. 274,224 was the highest ever recorded. Again, we're not citing anything. Um, Even if this is true, which I did Google, and it showed that last year was had the highest number of those that are unhoused in our history, and it was an 18% increase over the previous year. Um, that's an important statistic. That's an important thing to say. It would be helpful if they would be able to say where this information came from. Um, I'm not disputing that, but also should raise the question, why? 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 Why is that the case? Um, there's a long history of this. I'm going to keep going. Here's the statement. The overwhelming majority of these individuals are addicted to drugs, have mental health condition, or both. Again, not citing anything because why? Why cite anything when you just want a scapegoat, I guess? First of all, you can, again, I posted about this when this came out. You can go to two different websites, End Poverty Now. Um, you can go to endpovertynow.inc.org. You can search 10 causes of homelessness in America, things like lack of affordable housing, unemployment and underemployment, poverty. That's a pretty big issue. Which, by the way, did you know that Mississippi has a poverty rate of 19.6%? And Mississippi has around 1,200 homeless individuals. It's not exactly an urban state either. Mental health issues, which, by the way, when it says here the overwhelming majority, let's see, the numbers that are listed here in Florida, around 25% of the homeless population have mental health issues. That's not the overwhelming majority. It's a significant number. That's I'm not arguing that. But in order to say overwhelming majority, you need at least half. And no state is coming up with over half. Substance abuse. It's both a cause and a consequence. Nevada, nearly 30% of homeless population in Nevada struggles with substance abuse. In Kentucky, about 20% of homeless people have substance abuse issues. 20 and 30% are not the overwhelming majority. That's just not the case in there. Domestic violence, lack of access to health care, discrimination, lack of social support, criminal record. There's all sorts of stats here. This would actually be something that, and they have references. Amazing how you can actually have references when you're citing statistics. Also, I would say, where is it here? The 10 root causes of homelessness. If you go to Human Rights Careers, they have a similar type of list in here. There is where is it here? Yeah, they have statistics that show around 30% of quote chronically homeless people have mental health conditions. National Coalition for the Homeless, there was an actual study done that found 38% of homeless people depend on alcohol, 26% on other substances. Regardless of that, that is not the overwhelming majority. So I would encourage you. You can do some quick research on these things. You can find out that this is absolutely garbage. There's no citation of anything. There's nothing to back this up because it doesn't exist. No one has ever come up with the statistics that show this. And if we really cared about mental health issues, drug issues, and all that, we would also recognize that, you know what, those things happen not just with the unhoused population, but also with the housed population. Now, I haven't looked up to see what percentage of the housed population has mental health issues or addiction to drugs, using the terminology of the executive order. I'm also willing to say it's not the overwhelming majority, but there's a percentage. It's not the housing that is the issue, right? If we cared about addiction to drugs, if we cared about mental health conditions, it wouldn't matter whether the person is housed or unhoused. Yeah, we should do something about these situations, but we should not use them as a scapegoat. against people who are unhoused. I'll go on. Oh, what it. I'm going to need to shower after reading this. Nearly two-thirds of homeless individuals report having regularly used hard drugs like yeah, I can say it, methamphetamines, cocaine, or opioids in their lifetimes. No citation. What are you, how do you make a statement like this without saying, according to what? According to the numbers that we just pulled out of thin air? Like what is this? This is garbage. This wouldn't even make a my gosh, you get an F on this if you wrote this as an example of an executive order in a college political science class. You're not citing anything. You're just making it sound terrible. Okay, whatever. I don't know. Oh boy. And I equally in large number, I'm going to continue on. We're still in the first paragraph. An equally large share of homeless individuals reported suffering from mental health conditions. According to what? According to who? And all the other stats that I've seen don't show that an equally large share. What does that mean? The federal government and the states have spent tens of billions of dollars on failed programs that address homelessness, but not its root causes. That's true, but this sure does not deal with the root causes of homelessness. And the root causes of homelessness are not mental health and drug addiction. Those are symptoms of it. Those are certainly problems, but they're not the root causes. The root causes is poverty, because we're not dealing with poverty. We're not dealing with the fact that, gosh, I don't know, the cost of housing is ridiculous. And we're not dealing with the fact that, I don't know, the cost of living has gone up, but wages haven't gone up. We have a sick economic system. That's a cause. That's a root cause. But hey, billionaires got to be rich. Uh, the federal government and the states have spent tens of billions of dollars on failed programs that address homelessness, but not its root causes. Yeah, we don't have the same idea what the root causes are. Leaving other citizens vulnerable to public safety threats, because nothing sells like fear. Um, but so much for threats to those that are unhoused. I mean, they're pretty vulnerable. If you've ever spent time in a emergency shelter, people are pretty vulnerable. And there are public safety threats that happen to them, but there are public safety threats other places. Again, if we cared about public safety, we'd be dealing with gun violence, but we don't. Shifting homeless individuals into long-term institutional settings for humane treatment through the appropriate use of civil commitment will restore public order. Wow. Now that's a statement. So we're going to institutionalize people for, quote, humane treatment, because I'm sure we all trust the humane treatment that goes on in this administration, especially when we've seen the humane treatment that's been done by ICE, when we've seen the humane treatment of people who have lost their due process, when we've seen the humane treatment of withholding food from places that have food has already been purchased and it's set to go to disaster areas like Gaza and other places, and then it's just going to be destroyed. Humane treatment, sure, yeah, we trust that. Restore public order, like, is there disorder on a grand scale? Like, I'm curious. The addiction to order and control is problematic. Surrendering our cities. Wow, what a statement. Surrendering our cities and citizens to disorder and fear is neither compassionate to the homeless nor other citizens. Right. Surrendering our country to fear, which seems to happen a lot nowadays. Every time that this administration comes out with something, it seems to be based on fear, which is this document is based on fear. There's also a lot of projection going on, if I could say that. My administration will take a new approach focused on protecting public safety. Sure, it will. All right, that was the first paragraph. Yay, boy, we're already 20 minutes in and I haven't even covered a whole lot. Uh, all right, you ready? We're going to keep going. Section 2, restoring civil commitment. Here we go. The Attorney General, in consultation with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, shall take appropriate action to one, seek in appropriate cases the reversal of federal and state judicial precedents and the termination of consent decrees that impede the United States policy of encouraging civil commitment of individuals with mental illness who pose risks to themselves or the public or are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves in appropriate facilities for appropriate periods of time. In other words, we want to be able to um, put people in institutions against their will. Really, what it says. And two, provide assistance to state and local governments through technical guidance, grants, and other legally available means for the identification, adoption, and implementation of maximally flexible civil commitment, institutional treatment, and step down treatment standards that allow for the appropriate commitment and treatment of individuals with mental illness who pose a danger to others or are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves. How are you going to identify those? I'm just curious about that. And who qualifies? Are we just going to have random, well, you happen to be walking on the street? Like, I don't know. I mean, we don't cite anything else. So, uh, Section 3, fighting vagrancy on America's streets. Because, again, remember, what's the statement? My administration, no. Suffering our cities and citizens to disorder and fear. So, fighting vagrancy on American streets. We're not pushing fear, though. The Attorney General, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Secretary of Transportation shall take immediate steps to assess their discretionary grant programs and determine whether priority for those grants may be given to grantees in states and municipalities that actively meet the below criteria to the maximum extent permitted by the law. So here you go. One, enforce prohibitions on open illicit drug use. Again, the question is, if this is an issue, why are we limiting this to those that are unhoused? Why not on the housed population as well? Why are we not concerned about open illicit drug use in the housed population? And how are you supposed to determine that? Yeah. Why are we not concerned with the housed population when it comes to open illicit drug use? And why don't we deal with some root causes regarding that? Two, enforce prohibitions on urban camping and loitering. Oh, they make it sound so clean, right? Here's the question. When we criminalize homelessness, this happened in the Grants Pass case, where one of the lawyers was making statements about this. And one of the justices, I don't remember which justice, it may have been Justice Alito, you're going to have to look this up, said, well, why don't they just go home? Because they're homeless. Where are they going to go? So we're going to force prohibitions on urban camping and loitering. Where are people supposed to go? Oh, that's right. They're going to be institutionalized. Probably not in government funded facilities, probably private institutions, I would guess, who make money off of having their facilities filled. I don't know. That's a guess, complete guess. I've got as much to point to as this document does. So, if it's good enough for them, I guess it's good enough for me. I don't know. Three, enforce prohibitions on urban squatting. So why urban squatting? Why not rural squatting? Why not suburban squatting? Oh, that's right. It's urban versus rural tropes because, that's what we need to do, I guess. We need to be at each other's throats. We need to push fear, right? That's the whole thing, right? Four, enforce and where necessary, adopt standards that address individuals who are a danger to themselves. How are you going to determine that? And others and suffer from serious mental illness and substance use disorder or who are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves. How are you determining that? Through assisted outpatient treatment or by moving them into treatment centers or other appropriate facilities via civil commitment or other means, available means, to the maximum extent permitted by the law. So this is about removing people. We don't like what we see because then we're going to feel like, oh my gosh, we should do something. So let's just remove people off the streets. Let's just make them disappear. Isn't this what we do with the whole ICE thing? We remove people because God forbid we deal with an actual problem. Oh yeah, we're going to put them into sure we are. If it's an overwhelming majority, which is what the argument is going on here, right? Where is this? The overwhelming majority? Then the question has to be, do we have the facilities to deal with all this if we're going to mandatorily remove people off the streets? And then what happens when those treatment centers are full? Oh, we're just going to throw people in prison? Is that what's going to happen? There hasn't been any thought through this. That's assuming that there's actually logic going on here, which there isn't. Yeah, I'm being pretty harsh. Absolutely, I'm being pretty harsh because it needs. This is ridiculous. Um, Five, substantially implement and comply with, to the extent required, the registration. Listen, the registration and notification obligations of the Offender Registry and Notification Act, particularly in the case of registered sex offenders with no fixed address, including by adequately mapping and checking the location of homeless sex offenders. Okay, so here's the question. You're going to implement and comply with, to the extent required, the registration notification obligations of the Sex Offender Registry and Notification Act. These people cannot go to shelters unless it's a zero barrier shelter. So some of them can't go into other programs. Why? Because if you're on the sex offender registry, you can't be near children. It's really simple, right? Nor should you. I'm not arguing that you should either, right? So that means there's folks that are urban camping. So now we're going to remove people who are urban camping because they literally have nowhere else to go. To do what? Where are we going to send people? Oh, that's right. Make it someone else's problem, right? Just make it someone else's problem. Maybe they'll go away and then we don't have a problem. Because this is what we do. We don't actually deal with problems. We just make problems go away so that they're someone else's problem. This is why we have problems, because we don't ever deal with them. We pretend they don't exist. People on the sex offender registry is a problem. Not that people got issues and they got problems, but we're not dealing with the problems. We're just trying to make the problems go away. We'll just expand our land and we'll just take more stuff, or whatever the case may be. This is the history. We have a myth in this country. I was referring to a myth in this country about the frontier. There's always, what will solve our problems by expanding, as opposed to actually dealing with the problem, is what we have a history of doing. All right, so B, the Attorney General shall, one, ensure that homeless individuals arrested for federal crimes are evaluated consistent with the code, to determine whether they are sexually dangerous persons and certified according to civil commitment. Okay, that's fine. Take all necessary steps to ensure the availability of funds under the Emergency Federal Law Enforcement Assistance Program to support, with, according to this code, encampment removal efforts in areas for which public safety is at risk and state and local resources are inadequate. We're going to, we're going to take all necessary steps to ensure the availability of funds for the encampment removal efforts. I thought we didn't have enough money. All of a sudden, now we're going to make sure that we have funds in order to remove people from encampments. Because that solves the problem, right? If we don't have an encampment, we must not have any homeless people, as opposed to actually dealing with the problem. Why are people in camp? Well, they got to sleep somewhere. Got to sleep somewhere. You know, why aren't we dealing with the fact that we're the richest nation in human history, and yet we have a homeless problem? Why is that? Why are we asking that question? Why aren't we using these available funds to actually build affordable housing? It seems a lot better than going and destroying people's stuff and then just telling them to move on to somewhere else and make it someone else's problem. That's just cruelty. That's all that is. That's not actually dealing with a problem. That's being lazy. That's saying, I don't want to be uncomfortable. There's so many issues with this. Three, assess federal resources to determine whether they may be directed toward ensuring, to the extent permitted by law, sure, whatever, that detainees with serious mental illnesses are not released into the public because of a lack of forensic bed capacity at appropriate local, state, and federal jails or hospitals. Boy, I'd really love to go on with this. So, what does it actually say? Are we going to put people into jails? What's lack of forensic bed capacity? We're going to make sure that there's resources for more jails and mental hospitals, not housing. Why? Why are we not you because God forbid we actually deal with a problem. Instead, let's medicate it. Let's throw it in jail because that's all these people are apparently is just it's their problems, their statistics. They're not even statistics. We're not even citing anything. Four, enhance requirements that prisons and residential reentry centers are under the authority of the Attorney General or receive funding from the Attorney General. Require in custody house release plans and to the maximum extent predictable, practicable, require individuals to comply. You know what the current housing release plan is? Inmate so and so, do you have a plan for reentry? All they have to do is say yes. We're terrible about this. Why? Because if they don't have a plan with a set place to go, guess where they stay? They stay in prison. That's not a great option either, frankly. It's not good for the prison and it's not good for the prisoner. So what happens is people get released, they walk out and they've got the clothes on their back and that's it. And where do they go? Wherever they wander to. My previous call, we had people come to the door because they had been released from prison and they walked to our church door. They happened to come across our church and someone happened to be there. And all they had was the clothes on their back. They had been released from prison. They have no money. They have no job. They have no housing. They have no transportation. They have no food. This is our reentry process. But they sure did not want to stay in prison. Why would they? Why would they? So this is part of the problem. We're not actually caring about people and their well-being because this just ensures that someone's going to do something because they're starving. Well, and there's no encampment, so gosh, they're going to be rearrested because they already have a record. And guess where they go? They go right back into the prison system, which there's people who make money off of that. Lots of problems with this. Section 4, redirecting federal resources toward effective methods of addressing homelessness. Secretary of Health and Human Services shall take appropriate action to, one, ensure the discretionary grants used by Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration for substance use disorder prevention, treatment, and recovery fund evidence-based programs. Really? We're going to fund evidence-based programs, even though we're not going to cite anything that has evidence in an executive order. And do not fund programs that fail to achieve adequate outcomes, defined by what? I don't know, including so-called harm reduction or safe consumption efforts that only facilitate illegal drug use and its attendant harm. This has to do with people who are addicted. And so, which is more humane? Is it to cut them off completely or to work on harm reduction, to get people off of these things, right? So we're just going to cut that out, you know. Two, sorry, provide technical assistance to assisted outpatient treatment programs for individuals with serious mental illness or addiction during or after civil commitment process focused on shifting such individuals off the streets and public programs and into private housing and support networks. Because that's the solution for everything, apparently. Sorry. Oh boy. Yes, the solution for everything is to privatize everything. The profit motive, I guess. I don't know exactly. So we're gonna get them off of the streets and public programs because God forbid government exists to actually help people and to do something that private individuals don't have the capacity to do on a large scale. Like this is the whole argument with, oh, churches should do X, Y, and Z. I'm a pastor of a church, and I'm here to tell you that churches do not have the capacity to take care of all of the problems of society, and that's not what churches are designed to do. We don't have the resources, we don't have the staff, we don't have the training, we don't have a lot of stuff to deal with all of the problems of society. Governments exist for the common good. That's that's an old concept. That's not something new. I, the people, the social contract. Jean-Jacques Rousseau talked about this. John Locke talked about this. These are hardly socialists. These are people who understood that, my gosh, if we're going to have a civilization, then we need to take care of each other. We need to not kill each other and have the law of the jungle run everything. To try and move people into private housing, we got a housing where we got a serious issue with affordability. Oh, anyway, three, ensure the federal funds for the federally qualified health centers and certified community-based community behavioral health clinics. Reduce rather than promote homelessness. Well, duh. Sorry, that's my sarcastic side coming out. By supporting to the maximum extent permitted by law, comprehensive services for individuals with serious mental illness, substance use disorder, including crisis intervention services. Well, hey, we're going to increase the amount of crisis that go on. So, you know, isn't this the whole thing where we wanted to increase crisis intervention with our police force? Have someone come along who's, knows how to do stuff like that? But no, we couldn't do that. God forbid. I'm going to take a moment for here. Oh, I need to, before we continue, I'm taking a breath for a moment. We're not even done with this. I don't know that we're going to get to the other one. We'll see. Before we continue, I want to take a brief pause, tell you about a couple things close to my heart that actually give me life, right? Places where faith meets action. So first, Christ Lutheran Church in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It's where I serve as pastor, and it's more than a congregation. And we don't do this by ourselves, just like I got done saying. It's a healing community where we host 3 free health clinics that have welcomed over 100,000 visits since 2018. Again, we don't do it ourselves. We're in partnership, not only partnership with health providers, but partnership with people who support what we do. We couldn't do this alone. We cannot do this alone. There's no way we could do this alone. So if you want to be a part of something beautiful, something healing, and you want to support what's going on, then you can check out christharrisburg.org and you can donate. You can schedule a visit if you're in South Central Pennsylvania. I'd love to show you the clinics. I'd love to talk about what's going on. Love to talk about how you can help. There's lots of different ways that happens. Second, the Memorial Blanket Project. Every year, people from all over the country and even the world. We've had international blankets. People create blankets for strangers. This is about creating a massive art installation that draws attention to homelessness. And then we gift every blanket to someone in need. We've done this on the Capitol lawn, the Liberty Bell. This year, we're going out to Denver, Colorado. You can learn more at memorialblanket.org. And finally, like I had mentioned earlier, you want a tool that's going to help you talk about gun violence. Check out American Roulette. It's a novel that sparks honest conversation without giving any easy answers, without pointing fingers, without all the rhetoric and all that. All the proceeds go to organizations that work to prevent gun violence. You can find it anywhere that fine books are sold. All right, let's get back into this executive order, this disaster that is. Um, so let's continue. Section 5, increasing accountability and safety in America's homelessness programs. A, the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall take appropriate actions to increase accountability in their provision of and grants awarded for homelessness assistance and transitional living programs. These actions shall include, to the extent permitted by law, ending support for housing first policies that deprioritize accountability and fail to promote treatment, recovery, and self sufficiency. I'm going to stop there for a minute. Again, not citing anything. So clearly, this administration does not like housing first policies, which have been shown to work. Not just here in the United States, it works internationally. I have spent time in Finland. I lived in Finland for a year where housing first was the way that they worked, and it works. Why? Because, oh my gosh, if I'm not worried about where I'm going to live, now I can start dealing with some of my other problems. It's amazing how that is. The pressure is off a little bit. One thing, uh, it's not about deprioritizing accountability. It's about relieving stress of existence. This is this whole thing of ending support for housing first priorities that deprioritize accountability and fail to promote treatment, recovery, and self-sufficiency is essentially making an argument that you're homeless because of your own decisions and it's all your fault, not anything larger. And I can tell you, having worked with people who are unhoused, I can't tell you how many people were working when something happened. They got sick, and then they were unable to work anymore. Not because they did something that was risky or anything of that nature, but all of a sudden then they became disabled. Not from doing anything that was dangerous. They became disabled, and they were not allowed to work. The doctor did not sign off on them to work. And all of a sudden, because they're not able to work, they don't have an income. And guess what happens? You lose everything. These people had accountability. These people were doing the right things. How many people working, doing their jobs, they get laid off because the business makes bad decisions and all that. There's all sorts of things. There's a whole lot of reasons why people become unhoused. And a lot of it isn't because they did something and they chose this, that, or the other thing, and all of a sudden, that's it. As if only an individual is the problem. That's what this are. So, and it's really rich for an administration to talk about accountability when there's a whole lot of accountability issues in this administration. Too many to list. Again, this is projection. We want to blame other people. We want the individuals are the problem because they made bad choices. This is the old lines around poverty, around homelessness, that it's that person's fault. Because the reason why those arguments are so attractive is then, gosh, I didn't make bad decisions, so I guess it's not going to happen to me. It can happen to anybody. I've worked at food pantries, and there is not much of a difference between the person who's handing out the cans of food and those that are receiving it. A lot of the folks in this country, again, wealthiest nation in human history, what's the percentage of folks who have very little savings, who could not afford an emergency situation? They would be on the other side of the line pretty quickly. But we like to lie to ourselves as a nation and say, oh, no, that's not possible. This is just disgusting, frankly. Let me continue on because that was a semicolon. Increasing competition among grantees through broadening the applicant pool and of course, because we're gonna we're gonna have all these private for-profit organizations who are gonna deal with this as if that's the answer. Um, holding grantees to higher standards of effectiveness. Sure, you are. In reducing homelessness and increasing public safety. What about the accountability of a society that is wealthy but has homelessness? Where's the accountability in that? Where's the accountability in spending billions upon billions of dollars on weapons that kill people, but but cut Medicaid and Medicare? Where's the accountability on this? We're going to give tax breaks for those that are ridiculously wealthy, but we're going to cut basic services for people who are at the bottom of society. Where's the accountability? We want to talk about accountability, then let's talk about accountability. But no, of course not. We want to blame people and we want to scapegoat people. B, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall, as appropriate, take steps to require recipients of federal housing and homelessness assistance to increase requirements that persons participating in the recipients' programs who suffer from substance abuse disorder or serious mental illness use substance abuse treatment or mental health services as a condition of participation. Let's keep adding more on. Are we going to reduce some other things? Because I can tell you again, being poor is a full-time job because you got to keep participating in all sorts of things as if that's going to solve the problem. Poverty is the problem. Poverty is the problem. That's the problem. We're not addressing it. Instead, we're making it as if each individual is the problem and the people at the top don't have problems. The people who are the wealthiest clearly have all of their act together. They don't have mental health problems. You sure about that? There's plenty of people who are wealthy and supposedly have their acts together who have mental health problems. There are plenty of people who are wealthy and have their act together who have domestic violence issues. There's plenty of people who are wealthy and supposedly have their act together who have, I don't know, cheated on a spouse, who have cheated on their taxes, who have done all sorts of things. But we don't talk about that because success, the outward expression of success is our addiction. And if you're not successful, then I guess, this goes back to the whole, this is rooted in a religious belief also that obviously God has blessed me because I have wealth and all. It's the prosperity gospel, which is a bunch of BS. It's just terrible theology. It's destructive. It's scapegoating. It's blaming. It's not good theology. It's not Christian theology. It's something else. It's, I don't know what, but it's not Jesus theology. I can tell you that much. Let me go on. C, with respect to recipients of federal housing and homelessness assistance that operate drug injection sites or safe consumption sites, not only distribute drug paraphernalia or permit the use of distribution of illicit drugs and property under control. One, the Attorney General is going to review whether such recipients are in violation of federal law and bring civil or criminal actions in appropriate cases. Again, this has to do with they don't like the fact that we're trying to care about people. Two, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, in coordination with the Attorney General, shall review whether such recipients are in violation of the terms of the programs, freeze their assistance. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall take appropriate measures and revise regulations as necessary to allow, where permissible, under applicable law, federal funded programs to exclusively house women and children and to stop sex offenders who receive homelessness assistance through such programs from being housed with unrelated children. Question is, go where? Where are they going to go? Again, so I'm all for safety. I have no issue with that. Sex offenders should not be in the same place as children. But where are they going to go? That's the question. E, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, in consultation with the Attorney General and the Secretary of Health and Human Services, shall, as appropriate to the extent permitted by law. One, allow or require the recipients of federal funding for homeless assistance to collect health related information that the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development identifies as necessary to the effective and efficient operation of the funding program from all persons to whom such assistance is provided. So we're going to have a collection of data on people. Where are the people who are so concerned about a registry related to guns? Where are these people? Because this is exactly, we're going to collect health related information. Now, that could mean generally, or is it going to mean about individuals? It doesn't say, because God forbid we actually define out what this means. Two, require those funding recipients to share such data with law enforcement authorities in circumstances permitted by law and use the collected health data to provide appropriate medical care to individuals with mental health diagnosis or to connect individuals with public health resources. So you're going to collect health information in a government database. Anybody have an issue with that? What happened? What? Where are the small government people? I thought there were a whole lot of people that were small government people. Uh, we're gonna collect health information, and we're gonna put it in the hands of law enforcement and government officials to determine the appropriate medical care to individuals with mental health diagnosis. I don't know about you, but I see a lot of problems with this. Because let's say you've got people that you don't want in society. And so maybe you start changing the definition of mental health diagnosis. Maybe we recertify that someone who's LGBTQ is now having a mental health diagnosis. And because they're a problem, apparently, their existence is a problem, apparently. And so now we're going to define that that's a mental health diagnosis. And this sounds ridiculous because it is ridiculous. And at the same time, look where we're going. Is it out of it's unfortunately a possibility. That I'm using one example. What about other people? What about people who disagree with this executive order? Now all of a sudden, could they be diagnosed with? Could it be determined that they have a mental health diagnosis? Because you'd have to be crazy to disagree with what's going on here. And so now we need to collect data on people in order to force them into treatment to correct their belief system or something, some other garbage that goes on. This is a huge point. So, and then there's finally general provisions, which I'm not going to go into. They're just kind of the general type of things, and it's signed by Donald J. Trump, White House, July 24, 2025. My goodness. What a heap of garbage, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. So the question is, what do you do with all this? I didn't even get to the memorandum. I'll hold on to that for a future time because that's a whole other topic that needs to be talked about. So what do you do with this? There's number one, you need to vent when you can. Do it in safe places and do it in safe ways. Number two, what it tells me is that, I guess there's certain groups that have never trusted the government. Maybe they're right. Maybe we shouldn't trust the government in that sense. Stop trying to partner with governments, apparently. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea on this. There are good people let me just say this. There are some good people who work in government. I know many of them. I know many people who work in government, and they're there because they care about providing a good service to people. They care. They do it as an act of service, right? And unfortunately, what happens when we have garbage like this is puts them in a really difficult spot. It puts them in a very difficult spot. This is their livelihood that they're doing the service for. They could be doing a lot of other things, but they've chose the public sector. So number one, don't just blame government as a whole, right? There are a lot of good government employees. There's a lot of good government out there. Government is an essential part of society in it so that it can function. Coming from a Lutheran background, we talk about the two kingdoms. Government can provide order. It can do good things. It provides essential services. So it's not about being anti-government. It's not about blaming government as a whole. That's really important, I think, also. This is an executive order from the White House. The current occupant of the White House is the one who issued this. Someone else wrote it, and he signed it. You want to lay blame somewhere. In this case, be really specific about that, and then determine some steps and actions. So what does this mean? Maybe for some people, it means you run for office, for a local office, and you find ways around things in order to actually help people. As much as this kind of garbage goes to try and harm people and scapegoat people, you find ways to help people. That's a form of resistance. If you've got property, you figure out ways in order to do affordable housing on that property, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that works in your situation. Maybe it doesn't. You find ways to support people who are unhoused. There are wonderful organizations that do some great things. So, again, I mentioned during the break, Memorial Blanket Project, we're trying to raise awareness around homelessness. People make a blanket. Make a blanket. It's one positive thing that you can do to help people. Literally, people will end up with a blanket in their hands on December 21st. They'll end up with a blanket in their hand if they need it, or maybe it's a little bit after, whatever the case may be. Support organizations, nonprofits, because they have funding issues as well. And a lot of times, especially now, there's a lot of funding cuts going on. We spend plenty of money. We seem to have plenty of money to criminalize and to jail people and to forcibly remove them, but we don't seem to have enough money to actually help people. That's a screwed up society with screwed up priorities. So find nonprofits that actually are helping people, whether it's emergency shelters or organizations that actually get people into housing or work with them long term, which train people, because there's a lot of folks who have never been taught the basic things like a budget. They've never been taught how to take care of things because maybe their parents and their grandparents were never taught, right? It's not that people are terrible or they're making bad decisions. They're making decisions based on the information that they have available to them, which is not the same thing as somebody who has their life together. That's for sure. People don't choose terrible options. They choose the best option that's available to them, given the information that they know and what's actually possible. That's an important thing to keep in mind. So you can search for this. I would encourage you to read it through. I did a quick run through of it. Just talk about this. Talk about with people, and keep the faith, and keep seeing the humanity of people out there, because it's clear that these folks are not interested in seeing the humanity. All right, with that, I'm going to go. I will see you all later, and I hope you have a wonderful day.